All right, Lieutenant General Ben Hodges served as the commanding general of U.S. Army Europe, and he is currently the Pershing Chair at the Strategic Studies at the Center for European Policy Analysis. Hi, Ben.
Hey, Dan. Good morning.
You recently tweeted, "We must do more than just provide capabilities. We can't stand by while Russians kill civilians as we did in July 1995 when 8,000 Bosnian men and boys were massacred in Srebrenica. There will be huge risks, but some things are worse than the risk of escalation." Can you tell me what you meant?
You know, I don't want to see this continued use of terror by the Putin regime continue. I mean, every day we're watching missiles slam into buildings. We're watching firemen try to dig survivors out of the rubble.
Yeah, it's horrible.
And these are deliberate attacks by the Russians on civilian infrastructure. Over 2 million refugees have already left Ukraine. This is a deliberate weaponization of refugees by the Kremlin to put pressure on the Zelensky government and to put pressure on Western governments to where somebody would finally say, "Dear God, please stop this. We'll do whatever it takes to stop this." So this is a deliberate use of murder and terror by the Kremlin to cause us to crack. We have to resist against that. But when I think back of 1995 and Srebrenica and in the aftermath, everybody said, never again. How in the world could we allow that to happen when we had the power to stop it? Now, look, I'm not naive. There are huge risks associated with any more direct intervention, with direct physical intervention inside Ukrainian airspace or on Ukrainian territory. But we've got to figure out how to do more. A no-fly zone, and I signed a letter endorsing that. That brings with it huge risk, of course. But really, most of the damage is not being done by the Russian Air Force. In fact, a lot of people are asking, where is the Russian Air Force? It has not been that much of a factor. Most of the damage is being done by artillery, rockets, and ground-based missile launchers. So a no-fly zone doesn't really solve the problem. Going after those launchers, the rocket systems, the artillery, will do a lot more to address this problem. And by the way, of course, some of these are coming off of Russian Navy ships in the Black Sea and in the Sea of Azov. So missiles being launched from them as well.
Why did you ever sign a letter saying that you would support a no-fly zone when you know that the potential for direct conflict between NATO aircraft and Russian fighter jets would put us in a potential huge escalation, and Putin has basically waved the nuclear flag at Western countries over this? Why would you advocate taking such a tremendous risk?
Well, first of all, part of this, of course, is trying to decide how serious is President Putin. I mean, would he really use a nuclear weapon? Second of all, the combat power, as well as the diplomatic and economic power of the West, of NATO, dwarfs whatever the Russians have. So at some point, this comes down to, what do we stand for? Are we really going with all of these advantages that we have? Are we, in effect, going to be bullied by President Putin? And then for years later say, oh my God, how did we let this happen? Never again, never again. So at some point, it comes down to power, using power to stare them down. Now, it's easy for me to say. All the pressure, of course, is on our administration and on heads of state and government in other countries. And this would have to be done within the context of the alliance. It cannot be a U.S. only no-fly zone, or it cannot be even a coalition. It has to, preserving the unity of the alliance, I think, is an essential part of this.
Right, and I don't think the alliance would go for a no-fly zone, understanding the risks. I don't think they'd ever go for it. I can't believe that you would think they would either.
Look, this is about leadership, Dana. Of course, to the average person thinking, well, we'll never do that. Okay, well, most people said Putin would never do what he's done. And so this is about preventing the murder of tens of thousands of Ukrainian citizens who are being directly targeted. I don't know how this is any different from the Holocaust, where citizens were deliberately targeted by the Nazi regime. And after that, everybody said, never again, never again. So I think we need to be very serious about doing what we can to protect innocent people from a brutal regime, which is what we said we all were going to do after the end of the Second World War. So there are variations on what a no-fly zone looks like. There are lots of people out there looking for different ways to do it. I like the idea of providing capability at a much higher level than what's being done right now. I think that there are several steps we can take before we get to that. For example, the flow of equipment and capability getting to the level of the Berlin airlift. I mean, we're not there yet. It's getting better and it's moving that direction, but we're not there yet. This idea of providing long-range capability that can strike the launchers, whether they're in Russia or inside Ukraine. Ukrainian special forces are very good. Can we give them intelligence and more tools to help them be able to hit those targets? Have we given Ukraine the ability to hit Russian Navy ships, to hit Sevastopol, the Russian Black Sea Fleet's illegal base? So I think that there are so many more things we can do to help protect citizens from deliberate targeting by the Kremlin by going after these ground-based systems. But at some point, the pressure on all of our leaders is going to become so great that they're going to have to either decide, I'm sorry, and stand back, which is what happened in the 30s and the early 40s, or we're going to have to take more action. And of course, that would require very, very deliberate messaging to the Kremlin about what we might do to make it very clear what won't be tolerated. But I don't know how we can stand by and not do more.
Do you think what you're talking about, this escalation, whether it be targeting Russian, launch platforms, rockets, artillery, naval ships in the Black Sea, in the Sea of Azov, a possible no-fly zone? Do you think that these are items that are actively under debate with the U.S. administration and also at large NATO, that inevitably people are really looking at escalating the resistance to this Russian invasion, which gets more brutal by the day?
Of course, I wouldn't want to speculate on what planning and deliberations are taking place inside the Pentagon or inside the White House. I would imagine that all the professional planners, both in the Joint Staff and in the department, are thinking through all the options, all the cost-benefit analysis. And I've been impressed with how quickly they have moved on certain things, because it takes a lot of time to move so much stuff, to redirect aircraft, to do all these things. So I've been impressed with that. I can only imagine that planners are doing what they do, which is plan and develop options, but I wouldn't, I don't have a sense of what direction that's actually going.
Can you give me your assessment of the battlefield? Because there's a lot of smoke and haze out there and I have to tell you, one moment, depending on what I'm reading, I think they're stalled. The Russian war plan is in tatters, and the Ukrainians are holding out in these cities and can do so for a long time. And then on the other hand, they are encircling places like Mariupol and squeezing harder, and people are without food and without water. And even the troops that are fighting in there at some point need resupply. So how do you see the picture?
So I'm actually overall optimistic about the outcome of this thing. Kyiv, I am very sure Kyiv is not going to fall. The Russians do not have the capability to even encircle it, let alone clear it. And I don't think they have the ammunition necessary to reduce Kyiv to rubble. They're not even at that point yet. They've been going after Mariupol now for 2 weeks and Kharkiv for 2 weeks. So that tells me that it's a combination of the will and defensive power of Ukrainian forces, as well as the inability of the Russians to carry out their own plans. They've demonstrated that they are not very good at operational level joint, what we would call joint domain operations, multi-domain operations. So overall, I'm optimistic. Of course, if you're inside Mariupol, it's horrible. If you're inside Kharkiv, you know, it is tough every day and night. But if you can step back from that, after 2 weeks, with all the advantages the Russians had, they're nowhere near accomplishing, I think, what they have set out to accomplish. The logistical situation improves every day for the Ukrainian side overall, whereas the logistical situation for the Russian side gets worse every day. They have a manpower problem. They're starting to recruit now people to join what used to be called the Wagner Group. I think it has a new name now, like the League or something like that. They were asking Syria to provide some fighters. I mean, this is where they are. Very interesting opportunity for our side. 1 April is the beginning of the next official conscription wave. That means about 120,000 Russian families are getting ready to have to send their 19, 20-year-old son to become cannon fodder for the Russian army. And also, Russia has just announced what we call stop loss, that all the conscripts they have now are not going to be allowed to leave. So they're encountering serious manpower problems, which makes a challenge when you've adjusted your strategy to one of attrition, where you need time, you need endless ammunition, and you need endless manpower supply. And the Russians don't have any of those three. So I think if I was in charge of the campaign on the Russian side, I would be extremely worried right now.
What is your biggest worry right now when you look at the stranglehold on Mariupol, Navy ships standing off with possible amphibious landings that have been predicted for 2 weeks now on places like Odessa, troops amassing outside of Kiev, the constant relentless barrage of Kharkiv? Take your pick, Ben. But I mean, what is kind of top on your list for the next chapter in this bloody conflict?
Well, the worst thing, of course, is the murder of civilians. I mean, this is just so gut wrenching. We hosted a couple of Ukrainian refugees just the other day. I mean, people a bunch of them were on the train with me from Berlin to Frankfurt the other night. And these are the ones that have made it all the way through Poland and are coming to Germany. And it's amazing to see how Europe is welcoming, receiving these people, these refugees that have lost so much.
Right. And that's 2 million out of, there's still 42 million people in that country.
So it's really been an amazing thing to watch, but it's gut wrenching when you know what's caused them to leave. And so the thing that I think is in the front of my mind is how do we stop that? The second thing, though, would be can we keep the alliance together? I mean, that's been the one of the most important aspects of this is all 30 nations sticking together in their condemnation of Russia. More than 20 nations are involved in the delivery of logistics and weapons and equipment into Ukraine. This is a huge effort, and I think the administration deserves a lot of credit for that. But that's not for free, and it's not going to last forever. And so the administration has to continue working on that to continue the support for Ukraine. And look, I acknowledge.
Is the clock ticking on that? If you don't mind me jumping in, is the clock ticking on that when you take a look at the politics of, you know, France has a looming presidential election, the U.S. has got midterms. There's a, you know, right now countries have come together and NATO is standing strong, but do you worry about the politics, the domestic politics of each of these countries as this conflict drags on? You know, do people become firmer in their convictions, or do they wobble and waver?
I think the clock is ticking faster on the Kremlin